I thank you. And it was an hour's talk that was planned by me last time, but it so happened that I could not do justice to the and therefore very kindly both Vani and Vasudev, they asked me to continue in the next session, and therefore this is the second session. It is about the same topic, the topic of how Valmiki is called the Adi Kavi. It is not that before Valmiki there were no Kavis at all, because each of the seers of the Rig Veda is a poet. And the word Kavi occurs in the Rig Veda itself. Kavihi Krantadarshi, whoever who has a larger vision of life is called a Kavi. But why Valmiki is called an Adi Kavi? It is with Valmiki that the perspective changes. There is a change of perspective in looking at God. It is not that earlier the conception of God was different. All of you know that the present day conception of God is, we have the Trinity of God, the Brahma, Vishnu, and Maheshwara, and there is a conception or a belief or a thought that earlier in the Vedic tradition, the concept of God was confined to the Vedic gods, to whom we offer different kinds of offerings through the fire, Mitra and Yama and the Ashta Dikpalakas. So the Vedic deities, particularly Indra, Agni, Varuna, they were the chief deities of the Vedic times, whereas today the Indian Godhead is more connected with the deities of Brahma, Vishnu, and Maheshwara. Of course, Brahma appears here and there, Vishnu also appears here and there, and Rudra may not be as Shiva but as Rudra. Rudra also appears in the Vedic pantheon. But the overall emphasis that we lay on these three murtis is not found in the Veda. And most of the yajnas that are referred to in the Veda, the moment I say Veda, it is yajna that comes into the picture. So the concept of God or the deity was, it is argued, that there was a kind of a transactional relation between the human beings and the divine celestial beings, and the different forces of nature were personified as gods. And man, at the dawn of civilization, was overstruck with a kind of awe or a fear, and he pleaded for the help and support of the different forces of nature. And when the grace of the deities were bestowed on the sacrificer was grateful to these forces. And generations of people have maintained this relation of reciprocal parasparam bhavayantaha shreyaha paramavapsyatha. It is not only in Ramayana but also in other Puranas and also in Mahabharata and Bhagavata. We find here and there a kind of an interaction between the celestial beings and the human beings. You all know Dasharatha used to participate in wars between the gods and the demons. You all know that in the Bharata, Mahabharata, Arjuna fought with Shiva, Ishvara, Maheshwara for Pashupatastra. He went into the heaven and he even shared the seat of Indra. And here and there, even in Ramayana, there are instances when Rama witnesses the gods. Though the gods were not able to be seen by ordinary people, there were stalwarts, there were spiritually advanced sages and kings and emperors who the celestial beings. There are so many stories in our mythology that human beings could meet the gods and they even transacted with them. It's not only that, there were some moments in meditation and also in rites and rituals where possible that the humans could rise up to the level of the gods, and the gods would also descend. You know, all of you, how Trishanku wanted to enter into the premises of Indra's kingdom and he was not allowed there, and how he created a world for his own self. And even today, in our mythological tracts, Trishanku Swarga is well known. And all of us who are familiar with our mythology, we often speak of this Trishanku Swarga, this Vishwamitra, and so many other gods, and we are very familiar with the Navagrahas and the Ashtadikpalakas and so on. The Vedic deities are forgotten today. They are there. But still, the moment we say the Veda, it was thought that the sacrifices was mainly the business of very rich people and kingly monarchs. And it is so in our Brahmanas and in the Samhitas and Aranya, Brahmacha, Kshatrancha, the kings, emperors, and very highly erudite Brahmanas, they used to participate, and only those portions are remaining which were used in very great sacrifices like Somayaga or Ashwamedhaya Rajasuya Yajna, and so on. It is not that what we have today is the only text of the Vedas. We have been told that there are so many shakhas, there are so many recensions of the Vedas, and it was the Kali Yuga that Vyasa tried to edit the expanse of the Vedic literature into the 4 Vedas. That is why he is called Veda Vyasa. So while Veda Vyasa gave us in a codified manner, in a classified manner, that were used for sacrifices, the mantras or the prayers that were used to invoke the deities, and some episodes. There are some episodes even in the Veda concerning the nature of the deities and some anecdotes of the past. Whereas Vyasa did this, Valmiki also, in giving us the message of the Veda through Ramayana. So this is what last time I told you, that how the epic unfolds. At the outset, we see 2 sages, that is Valmiki and together. And Valmiki asks a question, a pertinent question. What is the ideal of life? Whether the ideal of life is to be learned only from the life and conduct of the divinities, or are there here on earth who are divine in their characteristics, in their behavior, in their uprightness, in their nobility, and the values that they pursue. Konvasmin sampratam loke gunavan kascha vidyavan asmin sampratam loke is very important. This is the question he asked Narada. Narada is supposed to be who is free to go anywhere and be free with anybody, whether it is celestial beings or human beings or the beings under the netherworld, yakshas, guhyakas, ishachas, siddhas, there are kinnaras, gandharvas, there are so many species of life. And all these beings, all of them are familiar with Narada, and Narada is also familiar with the rest of the beings, and therefore it is pertinent that Valmiki asks him this question, Asmin Sampratam Loke, now today amongst us, do you have a hero who can be followed? And is it possible for us to find a divinity within humanity? So the answer given by Narada is Ramo Nama Janaishrutaha. Yes, I have heard. So this is hearing. It is not read. It is not reading. It is not, mythology. It is not some story. It is not a fiction. Janaihi Shrutaha. What is Janashruti? Janashruti is gossip. So you can, it all depends on us how we take the word gossip. All of us rely on gossip, though we don't agree. Most of us, the information that we need, the knowledge that we need, all of us expected to be learned. All of us cannot refer to the scriptures. All of us do not have sources which are direct. Direct sources are not available to all and sundry, and therefore, most of us, we usually say, ordinary people. Who are ordinary people? We are the ordinary people. It is not possible for us to claim that we are extraordinary. Nobody is extraordinary. All are ordinary. Usually we say Aam Aadmi. Usually we say ordinary people are the ordinary people. Who are ordinary? We are the ordinary people. And let us, for a while, think about how we come to know, how we acquire knowledge. Everything is gossip. And it depends on power of discrimination. This is what, Sri Shankara tells in Viveka Chudamani. What is called Viveka? It depends on the Viveka. You have to have Viveka to sift and sort. Even with the original sources, sifting and sorting is your job. It is not the job of the source. We have so many sources of information. So this is what, Narada tells, Janaihi Shrutaha. This is what I hear from the people. People have been telling Shrutaha. I have heard people telling about Rama. I have heard people telling about the story of Rama. I have been seeing day and night people influenced by Rama. So the story of Ramayana, the story of Rama and Krishna, the story of our gods, you can take it as a mere fiction or a story as long as you are influenced by them, you are not aware of them, you are not sensitive to the values that these age-old characteristics represent. So the moment I mention the name of a god, the moment I mention the name of a mythological hero or a villain for that matter, as long as you are not aware or you have no concern with the values that they represent, then mythology becomes a fiction to you. So this is exactly what Narada tells. Look here, you have to concentrate, you have to meditate upon what these people have been telling. You have to discriminate, you have to use your viveka and make out the story of Rama, and then, this is what is called meditation. This is what is called yogic realization. So he just gives the story of Rama in a nutshell and asks Valmiki to meditate upon it. And this is how, we are told in the very beginning, Tapaswadhyaya Niratam, Tapasvi Vagvedambaram, Naradam Paripapracha, Valmikir Munipungavam. Both of them. So what is tapas? Tapas is serious thinking. You have got to meditate upon, anything you should take seriously, you start meditate upon it. It's not only meditation, it is, focus. It is focused attention. You focus and seriously try to make out. And Pana Vamalakam Yatha, the poet says, it was possible for, if it is possible for anybody to focus, even today, there have been so many marvels in this society, that there are some people who have what they call clairvoyance. They can establish relation with certain personalities and they can have a vivid picture of what they want to know. So this is what was Valmiki, and he visualized the events in the life of Sri Rama and he recorded it, and that is why he has been revered as the Adi Kavi. The last time I told you, almost all poets in one voice, they say he is the Adi Kavi. And the way that he has shown, that is the way of composing an epic. And a kavya with a purpose. A kavya for the welfare of the human beings, the welfare of the cosmos, the entire universe. So the issue here is, it is deity or God is not for some transactional purposes of gaining something, but you have got to change within, become divine. The human being has to realize the problems and the frailties of human world, and within, in this human world, he has to appreciate, understand, and worship, adore. Worshipping and adoring is not an act. It is not an external act. Worshipping or adoring is to inculcate, to become that. Brahma Veda, Brahmaiva Bhavati. This is what our Upanishads tell. Veda is knowledge. If you know something, you must become that. If you say, I know it, I don't go by what I know, or I don't practice what I preach, then there is no use of your knowledge. It is no more a knowledge. I don't consider it a knowledge. What is knowledge then? Ya evam Veda, everywhere, every sentence, this is repeated in the Veda. Yaha evam Veda, who understands this, appreciates this, you have to, whatever you have understood, whatever you stand by, that must be put into practice. Now, Valmiki, there is a scene which I described last time. He listens to Narada and then he comes for his ablutions, and suddenly when he was about to take bath in a very serene atmosphere, there comes a hunter and he shoots down the male crauncha bird, and the female bird starts yelling, crying very piteously. Valmiki is disturbed. What is this life? See, I want to concentrate, and I have been at a different level of thinking, and suddenly I am pulled down to the happenings of this world. There is so much of cruelty in this world. There are sinners in this world. Anything can happen at any time. How can we be insulated from these? It's a question. So what happens? There is a kind of a dilemma within. Thinking and talking of high things is not that it is possible for you to escape the reality. The reality is something different from your theory. The theory of high values is different from the practical existence. So this dichotomy of the practicality or the reality that the human beings have to face day in and day out, and the precepts scriptures preach us. Now Valmiki describes this dilemma. We think Rama is great. Last time I told you, he is Maryada Purushottama. But it is not possible for any human being, let alone Sri Rama, to completely practice what we perceive or what we appreciate or what we understand or what we hold very high. Moral rectitude, nobility, and pursuing values, all these are fine only theoretically, in precept. But in practice, as long as we are human, it is not possible for us to retain the same level of in our everyday, day-to-day practical life. Theoretically, we may cherish so many ideals, but to hold on to these ideals and maintain the same level of perfection in action is impossible. Circumstances in life do not allow us always to function at the same expected moral level, the moral ideal of high degrees. Temptations always keep harassing us. We fall down and succumb to the vagaries of circumstances. We are prone to commit sins. We try to conceal our faults. We wishfully hope that others would not find these our nasty and detestable aspects of our character and personality. Same thing happened to Rama. If we read between the lines of Sri Ramayana, he may be hailed as the Maryada Purushottama. Maybe people tell that he was unequaled and unmatched in his moral rectitude. Maybe he retained his high position of honor. His sterling character may even today have remained very glorious. All the characters of Sri Ramayana, his wife, other kings, warriors, sages, and ordinary folk, all of them praised him and bowed down to him in utter reverence. By head and shoulders, he remained and he remains even today above all the rest of the people of his times and the people of the present day. So this is what Valmiki as the Adi Kavi has. Ramayana, Sri Rama in Ramayana is pictured as an ordinary human being. Sri Rama himself openly tells, last time I told you, Atmanam Manusham Manye Ramam Dasharathatmajam. I am Dasharatha's son. I don't know anything about my true self, about my real identity. This is how he lived. I am an ordinary human being. And he a life that is characteristic of any ordinary mortal. He did so many things in his life which his higher nature would not approve. Same thing, every human being has two aspects of his nature, two natures. You want to be good, but you cannot be good. Valmiki has depicted Sri Rama, who is subject to or who is subjected to human frailties. Troubles depressed him, sorrows struck him, he underwent moments of distress, he cried, he wept, he was angry sometimes, he was in despair sometimes, he even talked of ending his life, he was depressed, he was sometimes very harsh. He was weak occasionally. But these, occasional weaknesses and whimsical behaviors, they have not tarnished his image, his nobility. Somehow Valmiki tells that it is possible for you, in spite of the frailties of human life, to retain your nobility. And Rama is presented as an icon of nobility and virtue, and we are asked to follow the footsteps of Rama. Rama today remains immaculate, but the fragility of human nature, they continue. They were there at the time of Ramayana, they were there at the time of Mahabharata. You say God, he lives a very noble life. There is nothing that we can learn. It should be a human being. If it is, whether it is Rama or Krishna, you should try to understand as persons how many difficulties that they had to go through. So Valmiki beckons all of us to raise above these human frailties and asks us to follow the footsteps of, and that is how it is possible for us to achieve success in moral life. This kind of, success is what is called spiritual development. Which or spirituality is not something that is disconnected with life. Your behavior, how you live is more important. And if you disconnect spirituality with your way of living, it ceases to be spirituality. Now, what I wanted to do last time was to take, I think, 1 or 2 episodes in Ramayana I took, and I told about how when Dasharatha and Kaikeyi decided Rama would not be the king. First, Rama was told that he would become the king. Next again, his own parents called him and told him that he is not going to be the king. And is it that he was not disturbed at all? What, usually what we understand or what we take for granted is he was Sri Rama and, nothing disturbed him. In the Gita, we are told what should be a Sthita Prajna. The details of the characteristics of a Sthita Prajna, Arjuna asks Sri Krishna and Sri Krishna replies, Rajahati yatha kamam sarvan partmanogatan atmanye atmana tushtaha sthita prajna tadochyate. We think, Sthita Prajna would naturally be not disturbed at all. It is not so. Now here, whatever Sri Krishna tells, whatever Sri Krishna has preached in his Bhagavad Gita, they are lived. by Krishna and also Sri Rama. Got disturbed, and Sri Rama was affected, and he was earlier excited that he is going to be the king, and he was looking forward that he would be the king. He looked forward for the prosperity that was ahead. Now, when he is told that he is no more the king, how he shares this news with Kausalya and Sita, how it was difficult for him to convince both Kausalya and Sita, and how it was difficult for him to convince Lakshmana. All this last time I told you. Dharayan manasa dukkham in privesha atmavan veshma mathura priya samshava. The poet very clearly says, Dharayan manasa dukkham. So he had that depression. He was depressed and sorrowful, but he somehow, Dharayan, Dhriti, he somehow managed not to reveal the sorrow within. And he had to, problem is, it is not only that he controls his anger or his anguish or his depression or his sorrow, he is disturbed that he has to disturb others. Sita is disturbed, Lakshmana is disturbed, Kausalya is disturbed, and so many of his well-wishers are disturbed, and each one is giving their own counseling. This is most difficult aspect of human living. Praviveshatha Ramastu Swambeshma Suvibhushitam Prahrishtaha. Prahrishtaha means, the whole premises, when he came back, they were all getting prepared for the coronation. So whatever first he had for that, people were jubilant. Next time when he went and came back, the people were all happy. They were all in a jubilant mood. But now you have to tell, Rama has to tell them, no, stop all this, I am going to the forest. Kriya kinchid avang mukha. It was not possible for him to raise his head and see people. Kriya, krihi. Krihi is a kind of inner conflict. Kinchit avang, he bowed down. He could not raise his head and talk to them. So Sita and all of them, they could not understand why Rama is behaving unlike how he was yesterday. Sita samutpatya vepamana chatam patim apashyate shoka santaptam chinta vyakulita indriyam. See, these are all words. Shoka santaptam. He was shoka santapta. Shoka, that is sorrow, misery. He had within him a kind of agony. Chinta vyakulita indriyam. It was not possible for him to talk properly. He was vyakulita, totally perturbed. And he was chinta. So he was worried. Tam drishtva sahi dharmatma nashashaka manogatam. It was not possible for him to conceal his inner anguish when he met his people, near and dear ones. Vivarna Vadanaha. He became, his color, Vivarna Vadana. Usually we are told that, Rama did not show any kind of displeasure in his countenance. But it is, Valmiki very clearly says, I am reading the Ramayana itself, Vivarna Vadanam Drishtva, looking at him who had lost his splendor. Tam Prasvinna. Prasvinna means he was sweating, very profusely sweating. Aha Dukkhabhisantapta. Sita was also very much agonized. Timidam. What is this? What has happened? Animidam Prabho. So Rama, slightly turning his face down, entered his own house, which was well decorated and filled with people rejoicing all around. Sita sprang up from her seat and trembled on seeing her husband stricken with sorrow, his mind perturbed with anxiety. On seeing Sita, Rama could not contain the grief in his mind. He was unable to hide his inner sorrow. He turned pale-faced. He perspired. He abandoned his endurance. Stricken with grief, Sita shouted, "What happened, my lord?" This is about Sita, and managing Lakshmana was still difficult for him. He comes near Lakshmana, and Lakshmana puts two and two together and finds out, he's very angry with his father himself. Snigdho dharmarato viraha satatam satpate sthitaha priyaha pranasamaha vashyaha bhrata chapi sakha chame. Oh, Lakshmana, you are so friendly. You are not only my brother, but you are my friend. You are interested in noble values, righteousness. You are valiant. You always abide by good path. You are dear to me. Please listen to me. You are my brother and a companion. If you proceed to the forest along with me now, who will support Kausalya and Sumitra? First, it was difficult for Sri Rama to convince Lakshmana that he would be going to the forest. Lakshmana wants Sri Rama not to go to the forest. He has to stay here. And Lakshmana says, I will look after everything. You be the king, I will make you the king. I don't care for Dasharatha or any of those people. And now, after convincing him somehow, then Lakshmana says, if you are going, I will also follow. Now what Sri Rama tells him, Dasharatha is now dependent on you. When I am away, you have to guard him. You can't trust Kaikeyi. These are the words of, note it. It is Valmiki who is telling. It is in the original Valmiki Ramayana. Kaikeyi, the daughter of King Ashwapati, may not accord good treatment to her stepwives after obtaining the kingdom of Ayodhya. Bharata is always devoted to Kaikeyi. Once he becomes the king, he would not care for the sorrowful sorrowful Kausalya or Sumitra. So, while persuading Lakshmana to hold back, very clearly Sri Rama casts aspersion on the future attitudes of Kaikeyi and Bharata together. When Sita and I are away, who is there to look after my and your mother? Ko bharishyati Kausalyam Sumitramba Yashaswini Asmabhihi Viprahinayaha maturno nabhavete sukham. It is not possible, I tell you, it is not possible now. If I go away and you are also not here to keep our mothers happy. Neither my mother nor your mother would be happy. It is need to protect, and therefore I want you to stay back. Now, I'm not interested in the story, what happens there, but only I want to tell you that the deeper anguish or the agony or the lamentation that was within Sri Rama is unveiled here in the presence of Lakshmana. When you are with your close people, then you may somehow hide or conceal your inner feelings with the people in general. But when you are with your own people, it is not possible. Same thing, I'll go to another episode. He was, even at a time when he had to go to the forest, he made some jokes, almost you can say childish joy. A poor Brahmin approaches Sri Rama when he was giving away his wealth, charity, at the time of his departure to the forest. There comes a poor Brahmin saying, I am very poor and I have many children. I have a large family. I am finding it hard to get along. Take pity on me. Rama asks him, can you throw this stick you are holding in your hands? Throw it as far as you can with all your strength. I will give you cows. Some cows are grazing there, All those cows will be given to you. All those cows that are between this spot and the spot where your stick would fall, all those cows will be given to you. Come on. Now, he takes, it is an amusement for Rama. He sees how this Brahmin suddenly, sees with expectation, using all his strength, waves his stick twice and then thrice, and he threw it. The bank of the river Sarayu, he got immense wealth in the form of cattle. Rama gives them. But when this poor Brahmana, for the wealth that was promised, for, I don't know whether I should call it greed, but it is a kind of desire for wealth. All of a sudden, so much of strength came to him. Later on says, I'm sorry, I was playing with you. I was in a jovial mood. I could have given these cows to you without making you take this trouble. But just for fun, I wanted to know how a poor man like you would strive hard in order to get something. It was improper on my part. Kindly excuse me. Kartavyaha, please don't be angry with me. Parihaso ayam mama. I just made parihasa. Parihasa is for fun. And there is a message here, a funny message that our excuses, we are poor, but we have useless excuses. If we work hard, it is possible for us. We have the strength. It's possible for us to find the wherewithal, but it is lethargy that makes us remain poor. I'll give you another instance. Rama was about to leave the palace. Everywhere there was mourning. Rama and Lakshmana, along with Sita, got into the chariot. Sumanta was driving. I think last time I told you, Dasharatha is asking Sumantra, the charioteer, to stop for a while. Rama asks Sumantra to hasten the horses. The king shouts, stop. Rama shouts, don't stop. Sumantra was confused. He did not know what to do. Then, you know what Sri Rama tells Sumantra? Tishtha iti raja chukrosha, yahi yahi iti raghavaha, rajanam, upalabdhopi vakshyasi. Sumantra, I will give you a piece of advice. It is not correct that, when people are in a mourning mood, to elongate this process. Let us go away. Now, you may be afraid. What would the king tell you if you defy the orders of the king? Chiram dukkhasya papish iti Ramaha tamabravit. But I tell you, this is worse. Don't delay matters. Now, people keep on, mourning. This mourning I don't like. Let's go ahead. In case, on your return, if the king, that is the emperor Dasharatha, takes you to task why you did not listen to me, you just say, Nashraushamiti. You just say, Nashraushamiti rajanam upalabdhopi vakshyasi. Even if you are taken to task, you just tell that you did not hear in this commotion and come on, let's go. So they gallop. So it is Sri Rama who is asking Sumantra to tell a lie. Sumantra looks up to Rama. What is this? Your father is telling and you are telling something else. Sri Rama justifies his departure from truth. Nashraushamiti rajanam upalabdhopi vakshyasi. So it is a kind of a rationalization or a justification that Sri Rama tried to indulge with. His only, logic is, it is absurd to prolong agony. That's all. It is disastrous to draw out the grief. And therefore, enough. You have to be smart enough. It is not that, you have a particular principle and you want to stick to your principle, but you should know the circumstances and you have to raise up to the demands of the circumstances. Another instance, the folks of Ayodhya, the general people, the people at large, they try to follow Sri Rama. And when he saw, that is, when Sri Rama saw the rural people follow, and when it was a big crowd, he decided to get rid of them. He used a trick. He instructs Sumantra to proceed ahead in a particular direction, and he stays there in the night for some time. And when these people, during the night, when they were sleepy, Sri Rama duped them. He misled them. He asked Sumantra to direction. And he made Sumantra come back from that side through another route to drive towards the forest. So this is a kind of a strategy that is adopted by Sri Rama, because again, Chiram dukkhasya papishtham. It's not correct to, pull on this moment of grief. I'll take you to another, I'll jump to the Yuddhakanda. Yuddhakanda, this is a very famous anecdote. All of you know how Vibhishana had a quarrel with his elder brother, and he warns Ravana to give away Sita, but Ravana would not budge. So he comes. In fact, Ravana censures him, calls him. Vibhishana had to come away from Ravana, and he comes seeking asylum with Sri Rama. Now, he comes and Rama is camping there on the other side of the sea, and he has constituted a council of war. He has, grand counselors there. And when this Vibhishana, all the people, all the generals, all of them in the council of war, they warn Sri Rama not to admit this fellow who happens to be the enemy's brother, excepting Hanuman. Excepting Hanuman, every one of these counselors, including his own brother Lakshmana, asked Sri Rama to reject Vibhishana. But in spite of the negative, Sri Rama raises up to his topmost level and says, no one that has sought my protection would go unrewarded. He may be wicked, he may be bad, he may be a Rakshasa, he may be undeserving. Nobody can do anything. He is so proud and so confident of his power, his prowess, his capacity. He says, even if Ravana himself comes, if he approaches me, requests me in a submissive spirit, I shall not turn him down, let alone his brother, he says. So this is another instance where, usually as a king, there are certain, defense, there are certain etiquettes. He doesn't care. Even Maharaja is Sugriva. Sugriva is the person on whom Sri Rama is dependent. But now at this moment, he asked Sugriva to go and personally fetch Vibhishana, and with this mediation of Sugriva and Lakshmana, Vibhishana becomes a friend. He becomes a common friend of all these. Another instance, when Ravana was engaged in a fight with Sri Rama, at some point, at a particular point, Rama gains some advantage over Ravana. Ravana gets dazed at it. He falls down from the chariot. That was the moment that should be seized by Sri Rama, but Sri Rama doesn't seize that moment. He doesn't kill him. He tells Ravana, you are tired. You have fought bravely. Now, you are at a disadvantage. You have lost your bow. Go home now. Come tomorrow. Come refreshed. Come strong again. New bows and arrows. I shall then fight with you appropriately. He sends him back. So this is his magnanimity. So there are moments, why a human being, how a human being can be looked upon as a god, how divinity descends on to the man when you show divinity in you. There is, this is a kind of, you cannot be merciless. You cannot be, these are, this is what is called ethics and morality. These are tested at such times. That's why Rama, he became great. So there is greatness is in Rama. There are, moments of anguish and depression, of test. So you have to pass in these tests. These occasions are, they are your testing moments, and you have to come victorious. Then you are divine. One more episode. When Ravana was killed, after the killing of Ravana, Vibhishana he says, now the last rites are to be performed. Last rites to whom? Who is Ravana? I fought with him and I am disgusted with his personality, with his character. No doubt he was my elder brother. No doubt in my younger days he might have looked after me. No doubt as a king he has protected me. So that he is wicked. He ruined many women and he took life very lightly and he has offended many people. He was unjust. I don't want to perform his last rites. This is what he tells. Sri Rama at that moment comes near Vibhishana and he says, it is not correct for Vibhishana to throw Ravana's body. You are wrong. Ravana was a great warrior. He was a great man. He died also in a war, in a great war. You have to perform his last rites as prescribed in the Shastras. This is how it is possible for you to attain merit. You have to do. So he insisted and got the last rites done to Sri Ravana through Vibhishana. Last episode, all of you know, this is how, the personality of Rama was such that when Sita was brought, it was Hanuman who was sent to Ashokavana, and after the last rites of Ravana, and even after the coronation of Sita was brought, it was none other than Hanuman who goes and brings Sita. Now at this moment, Rama asks Vibhishana to bring Sita. I need not, here all of you know how much Sri Rama loved Sita and how much Sita loved Sri Rama. All of us know. He loved her as his own life. He underwent this formidable difficulty. He faced so many difficulties, and he made so many sacrifices for her sake. But when Sita was brought there, the way he treated her was very shocking to everybody. It was shocking to Sita, everyone. It was shocking to Lakshmana, Vibhishana, the whole of the monkey chiefs, and even some of the surviving Rakshasas. They could not understand what this Rama is doing. But what did Rama say? Nobody raised any voice. Nobody told anything to Sri Rama. Sri Rama's countenance at that time was like that. He was so serious. So he just said that, I don't want to accept her. All listened to him. They all knew that he was very harsh to Sita. He was, no feeling at all towards this lady. And all thought that he was a very cruel individual. They were all speechless. But, at this moment, Rama was not a king. Came and took the help of Maharaja Sugriva, and with the help of monkeys, and of course with the help of Vibhishana, it was possible for him to win over Ravana. So Rama was at that time not a great emperor, though he was an ordinary a hermit. In this big assembly, there was no murmur of protest by any monkey or man. No one approved what he said, but nobody raised any voice. He was doing something that was horrible. It cannot be justified by anybody, but no voice was raised. No disapprobation was shown or registered. Rama had imposed himself so firmly that what he said was the law to everyone. So this is, it is not the position. See, what is divinity? Rama was an ordinary human being, no doubt, at this moment I am telling. But what he says becomes the rule. It was the decree of fate. Nobody judgment remained singularly undisputed. It is not only these episodes, there are so many other episodes as you go through the epic of Valmiki that makes it clear, that make this statement of Sri Rama himself, Atmanam Manusham Manye, Ramam Dasharathatmajam. This is after Ravana was vanquished, all the gods, they appear on the scene. Even Dasharatha was brought. He is there with Indra in Indraloka. And Brahma himself tells, "Oh, you are Vishnu." And what Sri Rama tells, earlier there was a prayer, the prayer from the gods to Vishnu. And Vishnu came down to fulfill the desires of the gods. And now, when their desires are fulfilled, all of them they descend and they praise Sri Rama. And Sri Rama at the outset very clearly, very simply tells, "I bow down to you, you are great gods, I am an ordinary human being. I don't know anything about myself. I don't remember anything about my Atmanam Manusham Manye." Manye means I consider Atmanam, myself. Atma is nothing but myself, I, the first person. Atmanam Manusham Manye. I only consider myself as an ordinary human being. Ramam, I am called Rama. Dasharathatmajam, I am the son of Dasharatha. I am the son of an emperor, and I am now, I have come here, and my wife was taken away, and I brought her back. That's all. So this Atmanam Manusham Manye is throughout depicted in the epic. And all these episodes, they tell us that you may be a human being. It is not that divinity is somewhere disconnected with life. If divinity is disconnected with this ordinary life of these mortal human beings, then divinity has no use at all. If somewhere somebody is divine and I continue to be a cheap fellow, then how divinity is of any use for us? Divinity has to be brought down here, and seeing divinity in humanity is greater than divinity or praising or respecting or regarding or adoring divinity somewhere in the celestial regions. It should be brought down here. It is here that you have to see greatness, and it is this greatness and nobility that we have to bow down. If you do not bow down to the visible, the beings here are divine. You see divine in noble beings, and God is to be seen in man, and not to neglect man and to see divinity only at a celestial region. Thank you. I think I have covered this. There's no necessity that we should continue with the same topic next time also. Thank you.